And I hope that you're here because you share a longing for a world that can flourish, and you're curious and or passionate about and or already engaged with the ways that Christianity in its many forms can be both a barrier and a partner in possibility to those within or outside its tradition, to bringing that longed for world about. I'm going to share some of my thoughts and work and experiences of organizing with and around and sometimes despite the church. And then I'd like to welcome your experiences into this space. What comes up for you about your spirit, your life, your work, your vision of change. So buckle in. Here we go. There's a wonderful organization called Church Clarity that monitors the policies for or against support of LGBTQIA people and women in church leadership across the country. In 2018, their research showed that out of the U.S.'s 100 largest churches, 0 were LGBTQIA affirming. 1 was led by a woman, and 93% had white senior leaders. This statistic is a testimony to both pasts that are still unfolding today, pasts of Christianity entangling with settler colonialists, white supremacists, sexists, and anti-queer motivations, and also futures of kids, cultures, and policies that will be shaped by morals defined by spiritual leaders of a violently narrow identity. Thousands and thousands of people under religious authority that will deem deadly things sacred. Despite significant trends in the downward direction, 65% of people in the United States currently identify themselves with some form of Christianity. Of the quickly growing number of non-religiously affiliated people, a majority of them grew up in the families of the 84% of households who identified with Christianity in the 1980s. And among those who practice other faiths, other religions, other spiritualities, and belief systems, all of us who reside in the United States are subjected to policies, practices, and cultural norms connected to Christian supremacist histories and the present day, well-funded Christian movements and campaigns in the public sphere working against reproductive rights, religious freedom, LGBTQIA flourishing, wealth redistribution, racial justice, and more. You name a movement, you name a matter of inequality, you name a vision for the future, and Christian influences will touch it. I speak specifically about Christianity not because everyone does, should, or needs to engage with it, or put energy, precious energy and attention towards it. No, I do so partly because as a mass institution, it is simply a significant contributor to our collective past, present, and future. I speak to it because some people have the call, the capacity, the desire to take this particular struggle to disrupt its destructive impacts on for the sake of the collective. I also engage it specifically because it is the tradition from which I come. I, especially as a white Christian, am accountable to my engagement with it, even as I live with my own fraught tensions with it. In my years of activism within and outside of the church, the dominance entangled in the tradition has caused my life significant hardship. And liberation theologies and spiritual community have also been at the heart of what has kept me alive in the deepest sense of the word, and is what grounds and guides me in radical political engagement. I know deeply how much violence can be and is done within those systems of Christian dominance and those outside of them. And while I do think there is an important conversation to be had about the abolition of a very particular dominant form of white capitalist institutionalized church, I also know that dismissing Christianity's role as prohibitive or possibility in the work of collective transformation not only erases the vast histories of radical liberationist movements who have found strength, power, survival, and comfort in non-dominant forms of the religion, but it also ignores how deeply entangled dominant culture is within frameworks of Christian thought. how much one cannot change without the other changing too. There is no undoing white supremacy without undoing white Christian nationalism and the white moderate and white liberal Christian theologies of tolerance, individualized forms of love, and a God model that relates to good people versus bad people. Disrupting whiteness means disrupting white Christian culture, even in its liberal forms. Ending transphobia requires disrupting modern Christianized assumptions of God's creation of humanity and returning to ancient claims so much more expansive. Abolitionists show how many of us have internalized belief in a God who acts like a cop, who punishes rather than transforms, who individualizes harm rather than recreates community. Abolition asks us to do the spiritual work needed to open ourselves to other understandings of divinity and humanity within or outside our traditions. Ones that change how we relate to ourselves, each other, the human spirit, the planet. It is difficult to meaningfully engage radical political movements without also having access to the deeper philosophies and beliefs that live behind them, the ones that help our spirits come along with the work. A lot of people are carrying around consciously and subconsciously concepts, or at least curiosity, about the spiritual life that has been influenced by sexist, white supremacist, queerphobic systems. There are forms of Christianity that uphold these and more, but there are always have been forms of doing divinity within and outside Christianity that challenge these systems, that understand God and liberation to be the same source, that enables a sustainable kind of spirit work that is collective, that is grounded, that is full of joy and honesty. This is not the stuff that is found in the 100 largest churches in the United States. But there are a lot of people in this country within and outside the church who are ready and willing to let go of the parts of their religion that are deadening, destructive, and ultimately counter to their actual beliefs about God or spirit or divinity or humanity. And all these folks wanting and searching for the life force of movement, the potential of transformation, the quiet comfort of knowing that there is something about love and mystery and connection and joy that cannot be destroyed by systems of oppression. These folks are a vast pool of potential power for good. This is one reason my partner and I created Enfleshed, an organization that hopes to provide spiritual nourishment for collective liberation for those on the fringes of Christianity and those outside of it who are interested in connecting with spirituality differently, queerly, mystically, as a source of power ancient and still unfolding. Not for individual gain alone, but in order to birth something different together in community with people of shared values in any tradition. We center BIPOC, queer, disabled, and earth-focused writers and leaders in the creation of our resources, doing everything we can to recenter alternatives to dominant forms of God-making and faith practicing. Inviting art by LGBTQIA people to be a sacred source of meditation, centering narratives and experiences that are honest and underrepresented, supporting hundreds of clergy across the United States and beyond in their worship preparation by providing them with weekly words to use that challenge whiteness, patriarchy, ableism, fat phobia, and economic exploitation, especially in the ways these things have become a part of people's faith, a part of people's beliefs about God subtly and explicitly. For some people, healing from destructive takes on religion can only come from total disengagement with it. For other people, healing comes from discovering and creating alternatives within the same traditions or similar ones to those they once called home. And we at Enfleshed are just one little part of a movement trying to offer just that, spiritual support in the work of healing. As dominant forms of Christianity continue their destructive influence on politics and culture, there are movements of people who long for liberative spiritualities to ground and guide through all the challenges we have ahead of us as a species and a planet, as people connected, committed to liberative values and actions, as humans who need to grieve and rage and laugh and marvel at the beauty in the midst of all this mess. Activist Grace Lee Boggs believe that movements are born of critical connections rather than critical mass. Critical connections at the heart of humanity is what I'm talking about today. The stuff of ethics, the stuff of love, of our interdependence and survival. To form, to disentangle and reform our connections, creating the resources people need in order to leave or transform what is destructive. This is a source of untapped power in many spheres and many of our movements. And it is a critical counterforce to the dominant strains of Christianity, keeping people, communities, and the earth under oppressive forces. There is no vision of the future that is healthy, that is just, that is liberated, without honest confrontation with dominant and supremacist forms of Christianities. An engagement, creative engagement, with spiritualities that enable people to unlearn, to heal, and practice alternatives or connect with other traditions or beliefs. But we have what we need to do just that. That's the beautiful thing about spiritual power. We all already have it. It doesn't depend on money. It doesn't play by respectability's rules. It doesn't ask us to be anyone other than ourselves, only to nurture it, to recognize it in each other, and to channel it from all our various directions toward a future of freedom and flourishing. With that said, I would love to invite you into this conversation to hear what's on your mind as we think about disrupting Christian dominance and Christian supremacies while also channeling spirituality for liberative purposes. I would love to invite anybody in who has a question. And if Nancy, you might help me bring anybody in who might be raising their hand. I'll give you a moment to think about what's coming up for you. Where is this intersecting with your work? Are you thinking about the beliefs, the philosophies that have undergirded resistance to the movements that you're working in? And do you have folks on your teams and your communities who are engaging in disrupting those philosophies and beliefs and offering alternatives? I'd love to hear what you're doing with that and what questions come up for you. Seeing a question. What advice do you have for people who have been harmed and disillusioned by traditional systems of religion and are questioning the value of faith in their life? Be patient with that process. For so many folks, the work of healing from our experiences and the church or elsewhere runs. The violence can run so deep. And I would just advise to take seriously the value of tending to your own spiritual healing. You deserve something better than what you have received if you've been harmed by these systems. Your spirit deserves better, deserves time and space and care for healing. And sometimes I know it can feel like there's nobody else in the world who is doing that work or who is providing the kind of community that is different, but there actually are so many people doing incredible kinds of healing work around spirituality, birthing totally new things or readjusting old things. And so I think I would spend some time looking for other folks engaged in the same kinds of questions and healing processes. I certainly don't have the answers for everybody, but I definitely welcome folks, anybody who is wondering what that might look like. I'm happy to tap people into some of the incredible resources and people and communities I know all over the country who are doing things differently. I think my information is probably available somewhere, but anybody is welcome to reach out to me at m@enfleshed.com. You're not alone is probably the biggest thing that I would want to be clear about there. Are there any other questions? Oh, we've got a raised hand.
Hello, my name is Emily and I use she, her pronouns. And my question is kind of about interacting with family members or extended family members, in-laws who are still, steeped in these sort of difficult and sometimes problematic traditions. In particular, just kind of everyday conversations where biases come up, or engaging in holidays where you may be expected to attend something that you disagree with. So just kind of how do you go about approaching that and not wanting to ignore something that might be harmful, but also not wanting to rock the boat or alienate a relationship?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. And it's very difficult work. And for me, some of it depends, like everything is contextual, right? And so if there are ways that you have capacity to meaningfully engage in some conversations around difference where you have a dominant identity, right? Like where the violence of that conversation is not going to do damage to your soul, right? And so for me, like I will have hard, honest conversations with anyone about differences in Christianity in terms of our understanding of its relationship to racial justice and liberation, right? Like that's where I need to practice my own patience and grounding so I can stay involved in that hard work. But for me, if it's a conversation around something that I have marginalization around, so around trans stuff and Christianity, then I'm going to engage that a little bit differently, right? Like that's less my work to do unless I desire to, unless I feel capacity to, and I may opt out of that on occasion and hope others step in to fill those gaps, right? And so just one of the things is just paying attention to where responsibility calls you to like really practice your best self in hard conversations. They don't have to alienate. They can be, they can be difficult and honest, but connective with practice, with care, right? And then allowing yourself to not feel the responsibility to do that work if it is something that is directly violent for yourself. Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to pop in with a question or to share what you're doing in your work, your movements, to disrupt some of the narratives or to bring creativity into some of the questions around morality and love and what it is we're doing together as a collective? Thank you, Emily. I see the question. Are there any books or readings you recommend for those of us beginning to explore this work? Yeah, gosh, it depends on from which angle, right? But If you want to explore God and LGBTQ stuff from a Christian tradition that is radically different than what so many folks grow up with, I recommend Queer Virtue by Reverend Liz Edmond. I could recommend so many amazing Black queer liberationist works. Kelly Brown Douglas is phenomenal. James Cone has done some exceptional work around Black liberation theology. Emily Towns. Catherine Keller is a process theologian, which brings a lot of like poetry thinking into relationship with divinity. Those are just a few. And I want to invite our next guest to ask a question.
Is that me?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. It's the last day, but I'm still learning the platform. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ladine, and I'm here in New Jersey, Muncie, Lenape, unceded land. But I wanted to just thank you for your offering. Thank you for the Spark Talk, and thank you for your creation with your partner, of your organization. I feel like what you're saying and bringing is absolutely important. And for me, my work is specifically evolving racial consciousness. So being able to identify and unpack white as a color, culture, and consciousness. And so for me, it's about consciousness evolution. And when I think about religion, as you were talking about morality, so much of this is wrapped in whiteness, and really in negative ego and separation. So when you were talking about the concept of God being like a cop and all. And so I'm just appreciating your work, because I feel like there's a resonance with me and in me, even as I stand before people to talk about race and racism and to really help them ascend in their racial consciousness. What I'm doing, in my view, is healing work. And it's holding a sacred transformational container so that people can ascend into the truth of who we really be, which is divine, right? Because when I know my divinity, and this is what I was hearing in what you were saying, then I don't need to oppress, have power over, and get into the religiosity of it, because I'm more connected to the truth of who I am and that we are one. And so while you are in specifics, approaching it from a particular lens and experience, and I really appreciate and honor you doing that, because it's actually important, really important. I'm also just wanting to, build a bridge that at the base, this is really about connecting to our oneness and not as a spiritual detour. Okay.
Yes.
Because I am very often in healing and metaphysical communities that want to detour from race, sexual orientation, the gender spectrum, and say we're all one, right? So that's not what I'm saying. But really being able to own all that I am in my particularity in this third dimension, but still hold on to and lean into my divinity and your divinity.
That's right.
And love you and myself as much as I can in my limited humanness, as God loves us, whatever that God is for you. You know what I mean?
Yes, you heard. Yes.
So I just thank you for your offering, for your presence, and for your work.
Likewise. Thank you. Yeah, that's really so incredibly said. And I think, one of the things that I want to bring into movement spaces is this, this is just an entry point into, all the different entry points, leading to liberative work. Some folks got to be working on addressing Christianity's stuff, stopping it and changing it, because it connects to all this deeper part of who we are together. So really well said. Yeah. I think we are nearing our end of time here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up to this conversation. Thank you for the work that you all are doing. Again, if there's any way I can be a supportive partner To any of you individually or in your work, please feel free to reach out at m@enfleshed.com. I'm going to put my screen up one more time so you can just see our information. But mostly I'm just want to say thank you and all the best in the rest of your day. And blessings on your work and your spirits and your communities.